Good morning and welcome to the Mekko Graphics webinar training. Thanks for taking the time to join us this morning. We're going to give you the tools that are going to empower you to use Mekko Graphics. This specific webinar is going to focus on how to create compelling charts that highlight insights for management, colleagues, or clients. And it's pretty jam-packed with information, so we'll be spending most of our time creating charts and highlighting the major features of the product. I'm doing this training using the latest version of Mekko Graphics, so for those with an active subscription, it is a free download. To download the latest version of our software, you would just go to our website, and there's a download button right here, right at the top. Also, I'm going to be using Office 2013 for this webinar. Side note on questions, if you have a question during the duration of this webinar, please send them on the Q&A tab. That way we'll keep moving along and have time to get through our prepared content. We have someone monitoring those questions and we'll answer them as soon as they come in. At the end of the webinar, if I have time to answer any questions that come in that might be useful to a wide audience, I will. If I don't have time to get to all the questions, or if your question is more specific to your client situation, or is something that is much more personal to your organization, I will respond privately. All right, let's get started. We're going to start with the chart most requested by our users, the famous Emeco chart. A Emeco can be described as a series of 100% stacked bars with an added dimension that helps explain the market. In this chart, you can see how much bigger Europe is than other regions because of that added dimension that the Emeco chart provides. Most common use of a Emeco chart is a market map, and this chart is a volume market map showing volume by region, by country. Let's go ahead and create this chart. Since I have Mekko Graphics installed, I have a Mekko Graphics tab right here in PowerPoint. And these first 8 icons that I'm highlighting here, these are what we call our quick launch menu. You can insert all of our supported chart types here. These are split buttons. If I hover over that the top half of the button, it inserts the default chart type for that category. If I were to click the bottom half of the button and the little down arrow, I can see all the different supported chart types for that family. And I can do that for all of my quick launch charts. I'm going to go ahead and insert a Emeco. It is the default here, so I'll just click the top half. And the chart inserts with sort of dummy data, pre-populated data. The spreadsheet opens automatically, the Mekko Graphics data editor. Series are represented by rows, bars are represented by columns. And in this chart, you'll notice, actually, let's go ahead and paste our data from Excel. So what I'm going to do for most of this webinar is I'm going to use some prepared content that I have in Excel. And then we'll also go over some other methods to get your data into your Mekko Graphics charts, including creating them from Excel or linking to an Excel range. But right now, I'm just going to copy this range from Microsoft Excel. This is just a data range in Microsoft Excel. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to switch back over to PowerPoint, and I'm going to just paste my data right in. Okay, and as you can see, for example, for the USA, the data only appears in the North America column because that's the only place that we want that data on the chart for that series. We're going to go ahead and close the data view and take a look at this chart. Speaking of the data view, I'm going to access the data by going to the chart data button here in my toolbar, which appears as soon as I insert a chart, this edit chart toolbar. The other thing I can do is I can just double click in a blank area of the chart, and that will also bring up my data view. And this data view can actually be docked in this version. So for example, if I wanted to see my chart and my data view at the same time, I can certainly do that. If I just drag it, it sort of snaps to an area like this, and now it's docked and I can see both at the same time. For the purposes of this webinar, I'm going to undock it so that you have a bigger view of the chart. So I'll go ahead and close my data, and here's my chart. So we've got our 4 bars here, but we have a lot of very small series in this chart that actually sort of distract from the message of the chart. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to group those small series into what we call an other series so that we can sort of focus on the important stuff in this chart. Now, as I've mentioned, as soon as you insert a chart or open a chart, you have this Edit Chart menu in PowerPoint, and this menu gives you all of your functions that are available to you in Mekko Graphics. There are other ways to get to these functions which we'll go over, but for right now I'm going to just click on the Bars and Series button, which opens up the Bars and Series task pane. And here's our task pane, and you can see that it's separated into 2 tabs, a Bars tab and a Series tab. And so in the Series tab, there are 3 sub-tabs. I'm going to go to Options, and I'm going to say, let's create an other series. I'm going to click the plus button to add a new one. And I can call it anything I want, but I'll, for the purposes of this webinar, call it Other. And then I'm going to move some of these smaller series into this other series. To do that, I'm going to view by series. It depends on what I'm doing, but it's easier in this case to view by series. And I'm going to just take some of these smaller series like Brazil, Portugal, Romania, Hungary, Greece, and we'll do New Zealand. Now these are going to be grouped into another series. By the way, you can see this happening dynamically as I'm checking these boxes. You see the other series has been created right here. I'm going to go ahead and close this. And now you can see that the smaller segments that I didn't need to really focus on and that were crowding and distracting the chart have been moved into this other series. This doesn't affect my data. My data is exactly the same. This is just the way the data is being organized in your chart. The next thing I want to do in this chart is I want to see more than just my label. I want to see my values and maybe even my percents. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the Show Labels button here in the Edit Chart toolbar. Click that, and I'd like to see all. I don't want to hide anything, but I want to see the values and the percents. So I'm going to go to this menu here, and I can see that. I'm going to open up my Format Chart task pane. This is where you'll spend a lot of time. This opens up here on the right, and in my Values tab of this task pane, I want my percentage to show on the second line, just for readability. So I'm going to just go to the grid here, and I can see all the different label types for this chart, and I can format all of my values for all of the pieces of my chart in one place. So this is a pretty powerful tab here. You can get a lot done in one place. So we're going to say that for the percentages, we'd like them to display on the second line. So that's what this little checkbox is here on the right. It looks like a carriage return, and we'll click that, and now it forces those percentages to appear on the second line. All right. Well, we need to tell our users what we're talking about right now. So we need to add a y-axis to explain what it is that we're measuring here. So we're going to go ahead and do that, and I'm going to click on the axis button here, which opens up my Format Axis task pane. The other thing I could have done is just simply click on my axis, and that also would have opened the Format Axis task pane here on the right. And I'm just going to add my title, Surface Vine Area. And now, the next thing I want to talk about is a fairly new feature to Mekko Graphics. Now you can see here that Spain is showing as a percentage of Europe. But what if I wanted it to show as a percentage of the overall market total, not just Europe? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my data again. Just going to double click again to open up my data, and I'm going to add a row for the grand total. And I know my grand total, I'll move this so you can see, is 5,553. So I'm going to add that number here. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to designate this row as my 100% row. So I can do that right here in my data just by right-clicking, and I can go to this Mekko Graphics floater menu in my data, and I can say set it as my 100% row. And that will change these percentages to be a percentage of my entire grand total as opposed to just my bar total. Now, if this seems too fast, or if I'm going too fast, two things to relax you. One is we are recording this webinar. This webinar will be on our website, and you can look at it anytime you want. Number two is we're at the very beginning of this webinar, and we're going to be doing a lot of repetitive activity as we create lots of different charts. So in the beginning it's a lot, but by the end it will seem much more old hat to you. Okay, in this case I want to just do a couple of other little cleanup things. The first thing I want to do in my format chart task pane here is I don't really need to see my bar totals in this case, so I'm just going to go ahead and hide them. I clicked on the General tab of my Format Chart task pane here. I'll go ahead and turn that off. Also, what if I want to sort my data? I can do that also. I have a Sort button here, and I have a number of enhanced sort features. This is actually a relatively new feature as well. We've enhanced our sort capability, and we can sort for Emeco both highest on left or highest on right, as well as widest on left and widest on right. So we can say we want to sort widest on left. This is a more typical view for Emeco for some organizations. And that's pretty much your Emeco chart. Once I click off this chart and back into PowerPoint, and inserts my chart right into PowerPoint. All right, that was a lot. Let's move on. We're going to look at another very heavily used chart by Mekko Graphics users. This is called a bar Mekko. And this is looking at growth by market segment here. A bar Mekko is similar to a Emeco, but it's not 100% stacked bar. So you can think of it as a variable height and width bar. Sometimes it's used as a profit pool or a growth profile. Now in a bar Mekko chart, the width of each bar conveys a meaning, but we have to tell Mekko Graphics which of our rows in the table we are using to get our bar width. Okay, let's go ahead and create this chart. Again, back to my Mekko Graphics tab in PowerPoint, back to my Quick Launch menu. I'm going to click this bottom half of the Emeco button to see my option for a bar Mekko chart. I'm going to go ahead and insert that chart into PowerPoint. I'm going to flip over to Microsoft Excel again so that you're not spending your time watching me type in data. I'm going to just go ahead and copy this range. Flip back over to Excel, to the data editor in Mekko Graphics and paste my data. Now the second row in a bar Mekko is generally used to define your bar width, but you can also define any row as your bar width in a bar Mekko chart. I want to just show you that you can do that right here in the data. You can just right click and you can, in this case, it is already set as the bar width. That's why it's highlighted, and it's also set to show it as a data row underneath my chart. So it's also pulling that data out and showing it as a row underneath my chart. These are all toggles. You can turn them on or off. And again, series are defined by rows and bars are defined by columns. So we'll go ahead and close this data. All right. We're going to see here in the Show Labels drop-down, the reason that these labels are not displaying is because Hide All is selected. We have other options here. We can show the first bar only, the last bar only, and then if we were showing, we could also define what exactly is it that we're seeing. Now what I want to do here is I want to sort my data again. So I'm going to go again to my Format Chart task pane. I just click the Chart button here to do that. And go to the Sort tab, and we're going to sort this as highest on left. Better. Again, sort isn't changing your data. Sort is just organizing your data. It's not touching your data sheet at all. I want to do some formatting of some values here. So I'm going to click on the Values button again. This is my, if you can have a favorite function in Mekko Graphics, this might be mine because you can get so much done in one place. What I want to do here is I want to make my y-axis and my bar totals a %. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on my y-axis row. I'm going to multi-select using the Control key, which is a way to multi-select in most applications. So I'm going to click on my y-axis as well as my bar totals, and I'm going to show it as a %. And I'm also going to add the % sign by checking that box also. Now I also want to add my y-axis title so people know what it is that we're looking at here. And the last time I did it, I clicked on the Format Axis task pane, and that's a perfectly acceptable way to go. I just want to inform you that there's another way to do it, which is just to right-click right on the axis itself, and you get context menu that's relevant to your axis, and I can just type in my year-over-year growth title right here. I also have some easy little tricks here. I can change the color of my axis, the width of my axis, whether or not my percentage is showing or not, whether or not my tick marks show or not, and other small formatting options right here on the right click. What you're going to find with Mekko Graphics, if you're a new user, is that where you click matters. So we have lots of context menus depending on where you're clicking in the chart area. Now you're looking at this chart and you see all the different wine types here. I want to just mention if you wanted to, we're not doing it here, but if you wanted to use coloring options, like if you wanted to make white grapes and red grape options, different. You can recolor by segment easily, so you can right-click any segment and you can change either the series fill color or the segment fill color here. We're going to go into color a little more detailed very soon, but you have basically the idea is that you have different palettes that you can create for Mekko Graphics, and those palettes appear right here in the color drop-down menu. Mekko Graphics ships with a pretty generous number of palettes that you get as soon as you install the product, but you can also download free palettes from our website and import them into your software. And you can even create custom palettes. So if you wanted to use, for example, RGB values of a client, you can create a custom, any number of custom palettes that you want. So you can think about this bar Mekko chart as sort of the natural evolution of a bar chart in that it answers the follow-on question that a simple bar chart might not be able to answer. For an example, you know, is it impressive here that Pinot Grigio is shrinking? Well, we can see in this bar Mekko that it's only a tiny percentage of the overall market, so it's not as big a deal as it might be if, say, Zinfandel was shrinking. A standard bar chart wouldn't give you that kind of information, and that's the value of a bar Mekko chart. All right, we're going to click off this chart again, and we're going to move on to our next chart. All right. And this is the other big chart that is used heavily by our users. The first was Emeco, the second is bar Mekko, the third is a Cascade. This is a Cascade chart highlighting the growth of global wine production through 2007 and the decline of that production between 2007 and 2015. And you can actually, I've got some missing labels here. Hold on one second. I'm going to add them. All right, so I'm going to open this chart and I'm going to show you a feature. If you're opening up existing charts that you get from clients and you have some labels that are missing, you can open up the Format Chart task pane here and you can check this box right in the General tab to place all the labels in your chart. And now they're all placed. We'll just go ahead and click off. There we go. So you can see that most of the decline in this chart was in old world markets like France and Italy, right? Cascade charts are sometimes called waterfall charts because they highlight each of the steps that represent the overall change between two bars. Each step in the series is shown in relation to its previous step. Cascade charts aren't natively supported by Excel or PowerPoint, so they're very popular for our Mekko Graphics users. They're most frequently used with financial data, and they're always the preferred chart for private equity professionals. So we're going to go ahead and create our Cascade chart. Again, we go to the Mekko Graphics tab in PowerPoint. We go to the Cascade option, and we're going to just do a regular Cascade, so we'll just click the top button. It inserts with our dummy data, which we can delete, and we'll go over to Excel, and we'll paste this data, and I know it looks different, so we will talk about that. And I'm just pasting that in. Now, yeah, this chart looks a little different. The data is staggered. Why did I stagger the data, and do I have to stagger the data? You don't have to stagger the data. I could have just entered all this as one row. The reason I staggered the data is because in this case, I want different colors for each series. So in Mekko Graphics, as well as in other charting, PowerPoint charting, each series is defined as a unique row. And if you want multi-colors for your series, you have to represent them as different series if you want those to draw like that out of the box. So that's why I staggered the data. Okay, so again, we're just going to go ahead and close our data view. And it doesn't look that great yet. So let's figure out why. So the first thing is that I have to define my 2007 and my 2015 as totals. 2007 is my subtotal and my total. And I can do that very quickly in Mekko Graphics just by right-clicking that bar and saying, show that bar as a total cascade. I can do the same. I could have just multi-selected, by the way, to do both at the same time. But now I've defined those bars as total bars. I'm going to go ahead and add my axis title. I'm just going to right-click on my axis and add my title here. Hopefully you'll see some of the repetition at this point already. So we've added our title. Now, this is the thing about this chart, is that you can't really see the individual changes very well in this chart because we are using an automatic scale. This is the perfect example of why in some charts you might want to make your axis scale manual. So we're going to go ahead and open up the Format Axis task pane, clicking on the Axis button here. And as you can see, for the scale, it's computed, which means that it's just computing that scale based on the data. There are instances where we want to override that. So we're going to click Manual. And in this case, let's change our maximum to be just a little lower. Oops. And our minimum we're gonna make very high. And then we'll change our interval to be smaller. And now, again, nothing's changed in your data itself, but we are just making that scale manual so that the changes are much more visible and clearer to your users. The next thing I want to do, and this is where we're going to talk a little bit about color, is I want to keep my markets the same color for this chart so you can see the relationship between, say, Old World between 1998 and 2007 and Old World between 2007 and 2015. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my Bars and Series task pane. We opened this up in the very first chart, the Emeco, but we didn't go into all of the different features here. And in the Series task pane, we're going to go to the Style menu. There we go. And we're going to help keep the relationship, visibly keep that relationship between these markets. So for example, old market and old market, using my control key here to multi-select. Let's say I want to make that blue. New market and new market, I'll make green. China and China. Okay, that's not a good color for this chart, is it? Let's make it this color. There we go. Other and other. And then our totals actually already are the same. No, they're not. We'll make gray. Okay. So now look at the difference. Now it's much easier to see those relationships. The last thing I want to do is I want to show the difference between the peak production year and the current year. Because remember, the point of this chart is that we're highlighting the production decrease from 2007. So we're going to show that decrease by adding a bar comparison line. Here I am in my Edit Chart toolbar, and I'm going to add a bar comparison line. And I can just click and drag this bar, the start or the end point, to show my difference in between 2007 and 2015. Okay? So you have average lines, you have growth lines, bar comparison lines, we have segment comparison lines, and they're all very similarly constructed so that you can just click and drag lines where you want them. Okay. Also, you'll notice that I have these segments linked here. And if I hover over the link, I can change the link. I can add manual links just by clicking and dragging from one dot to another. I can turn that off if I wanted to uncheck the link all segments. They would turn off. It's just a toggle, and we can turn it back on. Okay? So we're going to go ahead and click off this chart. By the way, everyone who has registered for this webinar will get a copy of this complete deck, as well as the data that we used to create it. And as I mentioned earlier, this webinar is being recorded, so you'll also get a link to that recording on YouTube. Okay, moving on. The next chart we're going to create is a bubble chart. We just looked at global wine production. Now we're going to look at consumption by market. And in this chart, we're showing consumption volume per capita on the x-axis and consumption growth on the y. And in a bubble chart, the size of the bubble represents the size here. It represents the total population for that country. So as you can see, China is the biggest bubble because they have the largest population. And they also represent the highest growth. But they're starting with a very low per capita consumption. Portugal, on the other hand, is a relatively high per capita consumption market, but a very small country, and consumption is actually declining. In addition, we've added an axis break here to highlight the distribution range in the consumption across the various markets, so we'll be going over axis breaks also. All right, let's go ahead and create this bubble chart. Again, we're going to go to our Mekko Graphics tab in PowerPoint. We're going to, there's many different types of bubble charts here. We're going to just do a regular XY linear bubble here, which is the top half of the button. We're going to hop over to Excel and copy this range, and we're going to talk about the different structure. So let me paste this range. Okay, so as you can see, the structure of a bubble or a scatter chart is different from a bar chart. You have your series name, you have your y and your x and your y coordinates, and then you have your relative bubble size here. So we'll go ahead and close our data, and here's our chart. We want to provide more information about this reference bubble. What is it that we're referencing? So we can do a couple of different things, but I want to use this opportunity to talk about the ability to take any label in your chart, any label at all, double click it, and you can edit it right there on the spot. So in this case, maybe I want to add a description. Oh, maybe I'll add a return there. Okay. So I can in-place, it's called in-place editing, so you can do that on any label. This does not affect your data. This is just editing labels on charts. Some people use it to abbreviate if a label is very long, or to add a description like we just did. But if you have an in-place edited label or an edited label in your chart, you will see these little red markers that indicate that it is edited. Obviously, they don't show up when they're inserted in PowerPoint, but it's a great way for you to see, like when you get a chart from another colleague, it's easy to see, oh, that label's edited. And it's just a way for you to recognize that. So one thing that I'd like to do is just to better distribute this data, we're going to add an axis break. So we can, where you click matters when you add an axis break. So we'll add, so we're just right-clicking on the, in this case it's the X, you can do this on the Y also, and you can add a break. And that just better distributes the data across the chart. If you hover, if you click the break itself and hover over it, you can see the boundaries of that break. You can also, if you hover over the boundary, you can widen it or narrow it, which just shows the difference in the display of that break on your chart. Now we're going to go to the Format Axis task pane, again clicking on the Axis button. And we want to show our y-axis as a %. So we're going to do that right here. You probably have also realized that you could have done this through the Values tab. But I'm doing it here to A, show you it's here, and B, to show you that you can also sort of, you have a lot to do in an axis at once. It's probably faster to just open up the task pane for axis and do it all in one place. So we're going to add our consumption. This is why I don't type a lot in these webinars. Oh my goodness. Consumption growth here. And then for the x-axis, I'll add my consumption volume. Oh my goodness. There we go. And again, I need to tell people what I'm talking about here. What's my measurement on this x-axis? It's actually liters, right? So what I'd like to do is I'd like to add a custom suffix, a custom unit for my x-axis. So I'm just going to go right here, and I have a bunch of pre-populated units that I could choose from. I don't see liter here. So I'm going to just add this, check this little plus button, and I'm going to add liter. And now you can see that we're talking about liters. In a bubble chart, the reference bubble is almost considered like a third axis. So you saw that I had in-place edited this label here. I didn't have to do that. I could have just added my title here for that reference bubble. Also, the value of that bubble, the size is computed based on my data. If I wanted to change that, I could add any value here. All right, we're going to go ahead and click off this chart. And we're going to take a little bit of a left turn for a second, because what I'd like to do is I'd like to talk a little bit about the Preference Manager. The Preference Manager is a productivity enhancer. The Preference Manager is where you're going to define all of your default values for Mekko Graphics. You're going to customize your color palettes, your themes, your default font typeface, and a bunch of other defaults. So it's giving you full customization of your colors, your color usage, your fonts, and other settings that are going to affect your chart appearance. So how do I do that? Well, in the Mekko Graphics tab in PowerPoint is a button called Preference Manager. It has two tabs. The first tab is my themes or my palettes, and the second tab is settings. So like I said, Mekko Graphics comes sort of out of the box with a bunch of palettes that we provide, with the ability to download any number of palettes from our website or import them from other means or create your own. We have our standard palettes here, and then any custom palettes will appear in the custom section. If you want that palette to show up in that color drop-down, remember that color drop-down in Mekko Graphics where we saw the palettes? If you want to see it in Mekko Graphics, you have to check Show in UI here. If you don't want to see it, uncheck it. And the default palette is the one that has the little bullet point. So for me, I'm using Modern, which is one of our standard palettes, as our default palette. So those are the colors that will be used upon creation of a new chart. If a lot of people ask, how do I use my standard PowerPoint colors? Like if I have a PowerPoint theme, I want those colors in my charts. I want that palette, I want access to that palette for use in my charts. So we're going to go over that very quickly. We're going to just say New. And it's giving me sort of a blank slate of to create my palette. And what I want to do in this case is I want to go right down here to add colors from file. And I want to choose a PowerPoint theme, PowerPoint file. And it's going to navigate me to where my Microsoft themes are located in the standard default location. And I'm going to just choose. As you can see, they're all XML files. I'm just going to choose one. I think I'm in the mood for blue warm. So I'll choose that. And then you can see that all of these colors just import immediately from my PowerPoint theme. And then I can add any one of these, all of them, or any subset to my draw order. So for example, if I just want to add these, I'm selecting them. Now how I did that is I clicked the top one and then I held down my Shift key and I selected the bottom one as an inclusive multi-select feature. I'm going to choose the right arrow, and that's a pretty big palette, but that's my sample bar of what my palette would look like drawn from segments in a bar going up. I can also change my font here. Whether my borders are black and white. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and give this a name. I think it was called Warm Blue or Blue Warm or something. And then I have to define my monochrome color if I'm not using multicolor, what those colors will be. So I'll go ahead and do that here as well. And my bubble chart color. And scatter color, I'll just choose something. And then also for my Gantt charts, which we haven't looked at, the header and a highlight color. Okay, and you can see it just showed up here in my list. And if I want it to show up in my user interface, I'll just check that button. Going over to the Settings tab, I have a number of different options. Chart style, the no shading, you can think of that as monochromatic or multicolor. And then I have other settings here, most of which are self-explanatory. We have a video that kind of goes over all of these. I'm not going to go over all of these in this webinar, but just to give you an idea. Okay, great. Moving back to our charts, this is a classic chart for showing growth over time, right? This is a stacked bar with a CAGR and a CAGR growth line. And the big value of the CAGR growth line is that you can see the total CAGR in addition to each one of the segment CAGRs. So we're going to go ahead and create this chart. Okay, so from our Mekko Graphics tab, we're going to go ahead and create a stacked bar. And we're going to go ahead and paste our data. Okay. Now, this doesn't have a CAGR column yet, so it just looks like that. But I want to add a CAGR column to this chart. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm just going to go add a title, which would be, I guess, 2011 to 2015. And then I'm going to enter my formula for CAGR, which is CAGR, and then the first argument would be B2. The second would be F2, and then the number of periods for that chart. And now I have my CAGR, and I can propagate that down to the other two rows. And if I want to designate this, which I do, if I want to designate this as a CAGR column, I can do that right here in the data. I can do that other places also, but it's so fast and easy right here in the floater menu. I'm right-clicking on that cell, and I'm just saying, please show that bar as a CAGR. And there it is. By the way, these margins, I don't know if you just noticed that I kind of nudged that top margin down with my mouse. Any one of these margins that have these little handles, you can nudge them, just click and drag them to change the sort of relative real estate of different sections of your chart. If you don't want to see them, you can turn them off here, show hide margin. It's just a toggle. Okay, so we just did the magic of creating a CAGR column, and I also want to create a growth line for this chart and designate that growth line as a CAGR growth line. So in my edit chart toolbar, I've got this function for growth line. It goes from first to last bar. And then if I just select that arrow, select that line, and right-click, I have the option to just very quickly show it as a CAGR as opposed to an absolute value. There we go. So now I've got my total CAGR showing as a growth line. I've got my individual CAGR values here. I don't want to see this here because I'm going to show a legend. So I'm going to go to my, hopefully you'll predict that I'm going to do this, the Show Labels menu item here in my Edit Chart toolbar. Remember, we've gone through this. And you can say, no, I don't want to see first bar only. I want to hide everything from my chart. And instead, I want to insert a legend. So there's my legend. And I can even click this legend and say, can you please align it to my CAGR? This only appears if you have a CAGR, by the way. But by the way, you also have all of these other position options for your legend, or you can manually move it anywhere you want and resize it anywhere you want on your chart. But we're going to go ahead and just align it to CAGR. So now the values are aligned to my CAGR chart, to my CAGR column. And then the last thing I want to do is just demonstrate another fairly new feature called the segment comparison line. So this CAGR is showing the compound annual growth, but what if you wanted to show the absolute difference just for a segment or two segments? You would want to add a segment comparison line. So a segment comparison line is comparing the location to the stack in a stack to a location in a different stack. So we'll go ahead and just add a comparison line. The default is, this is fine. If we wanted to look at, say, the iPhone from 2011 to the iPhone in 2015, I can move this to any segment that I want, as you can see, just by clicking and dragging. And then if we don't like where that line and label kind of plays, we can We can sort of move that to get it out of the way like so. Okay, one last thing I want to do in this chart. Sometimes people get data from spreadsheets, and the data, the way it's organized in the spreadsheet, makes the data hard to read. So we can change the data scale in our y-axis. I'm not talking about the axis scale, I'm talking about the data scale. And this is another this is a feature that I would consider another really strong productivity enhancer, because it allows you to change the display in your chart without ever having to massage your data. So we're going to go to the Format Chart task pane. Open that up. And we're going to go to that Values tab. By the way, I should have said this. You can get there immediately just by clicking on the numbers icon here in your Edit Chart toolbar also. So instead of opening up the Format task pane and then clicking Values, it would go directly here to the Values tab. That was a request by a user, and we added it. And in this case, we are looking at these numbers which came from our data, but they're not that helpful. So what we want to do is we want to change the exponent. We want to change the scale of our data in that y-axis. So we're going to increase the exponent by 3. So we'll just increase it by 3, and now we want to add units to this y-axis. So we can do that just by clicking the y-axis and saying we're talking about millions. And now it's just a little bit better than seeing that giant number. Again, just a productivity enhancement. All right, we're going to click off this chart. Okay, now we're going to talk about different ways to get our data into our charts. So you have the full range of options for using Excel to create your charts. You can link to Excel. For our users who have used our product for a long time, this is a long-standing feature where you can create a chart in PowerPoint and then you can link that data to an Excel spreadsheet range and set it up to be updated either manually or automatically. Additionally, and this is more new, you can create a chart from an Excel spreadsheet and you can drop that chart into a PowerPoint presentation. So you can create that chart directly from Excel. And in addition to that, you can also create and place and edit that chart from Excel into Excel. So we've added full Mekko Graphics capability in Microsoft Excel. So, and then you can move charts from Excel to PowerPoint and it will still remain linked. So let's demonstrate. Okay, so this is a chart that's not linked right now. So if I open it up, this is a chart. It's a lovely chart. It's got its data. It's not linked to anything. Now I'm going to go back over to my spreadsheet. And I have this data in Microsoft Excel. And I would like to tell, because I want to maybe do periodic updates, like I want to add 2018 or 2019 or whatever, and I don't want to have to recreate this chart every time, I am going to link this chart to this range. So I'm going to go back over to PowerPoint. And I'm going to say, okay, in this link to Excel dropdown, I'm going to say link to what I have selected right now in Excel. And it did. If you notice, it added that 2017 bar because that was what was selected. And you'll also notice that the chart is green bordered, indicating that it has an active link to an Excel spreadsheet. And now that it has an active link to that Excel spreadsheet, I could go over to Excel, and I could add data like so. Go back to PowerPoint. It's red bordered. Oh yeah, it's linked, but guess what? It's not synced right now. So I could go to the Link to Excel menu and say, please refresh. Please go ahead and make sure that everything that I have selected is still here. Boom, it added the additional column, and the chart is now green bordered, indicating, yep, now it's synced. Okay, so let's talk about now is how can we do this from Excel? And I want to preface this piece by saying we have many videos on our website that show this in detail. For those who want to see this again, this is a complex, for people that haven't used it or who are learning it, it can be a little bit tricky to learn in the very beginning. So we've created some pretty detailed videos on our website that you can feel free to watch, and then obviously you can also ask us questions at any point as well. But now what we're going to do is we're going to go right to Excel. I'm going to go to this spreadsheet, the iTunes Market. And you might notice right away that you have a Mekko Graphics tab in Excel now also. And you have two options. You can create a chart from this range, and you can drop it into PowerPoint, or you can drop it into Microsoft Excel. And Mekko Graphics is fully functional in Microsoft Excel also. So we're going to go ahead and drop it into PowerPoint for the purposes of this webinar. So we're going to go to our Mekko Graphics tab, this quick launch. We've got chart in PowerPoint selected so it knows where to put it. And we're just going to click stacked bar. It navigates us right back to PowerPoint. And notice my cursor is like a little tiny, cute little Mekko Graphics icon that's saying, you've got a chart you're ready to drop. Tell me where you want to drop it. I click my mouse, and that's where it drops. And it's green bordered, indicating, obviously, since we just created it, that is synced to the Excel range. And if I open up my data, I'm just double clicking here in the white area, I can see that here's my data. And for revenue, I want to show that actually as a line. So I can do it right here in my data, just right click and say, show the series as a line, please. And also, by the way, could you plot it on the second y-axis? So create a second y and please plot that line on the second y-axis. And here's my second y-axis, here's my line. I can click on that line, just like I can click on a bar. I can make the fill color whatever I want. That's too light. Let's try that. Okay. And if I go to my Format Axis task pane, or I right-click on the axes, I could do it that way also. I can add my titles. Revenue. I can make that $, right, and add my maybe millions. There we go. And I could have done that on the other one also. Now I'm going to click off this chart, and I'm going to show you something called the Excel Link Manager. So in the Mekko Graphics tab, I'm going to open up my Excel Link Manager, and this is like sort of like a control panel for all of your linked charts. And it says, okay, chart 15, This is the name of the spreadsheet. This is where it's located. This is the range you chose. This is when you last modified it. The status is synced. Now, what if I want to, remember how we refreshed our data when the data changed? What if I don't want to do that? What if I want to tell Mekko Graphics automatically update my data, my chart, when the data changes? I'm going to do that by clicking on this auto checkbox. So now I'm telling, for slide 15, I'm saying, if this data changes, automatically update it without me having to manually intervene to refresh my data. So let's go back to Excel and let's add a column. It's 2017. I'm ready to add my data. Okay, and I'm going to click back to PowerPoint, and I didn't do anything, but it's right here. Okay, so now you can automatically update your data by clicking that auto checkbox. Okay, so that's a very quick overview of all of the ways that you can use Excel to generate and update charts. Again, this is also in detailed videos on our website as well. Okay, we're almost at the end of this webinar. The next thing I want to show you is our enhanced sort. So I'm just going to go ahead and open up this chart about smartphone apps, how many installed apps for free versus paid for the different regions that you see here. You can see that you can see how many have the most free apps, how many have the most paid apps. Now, what we're going to do is we want to sort the highest bar on the left and sort in descending order. So we're going to go to the chart task pane, and we're going to go to the sort tab. And we want to sort highest on left in this case. However, we also want the United States, because we're comparing to the United States, we want the United States to always be on the left no matter what. So first we're going to say, please sort highest on left. But US is somewhere here in the middle. So we're going to go to our bars and series task pane, and we're going to create an exception. We're going to say, you know what? For US, please don't include that in my sort. Please exclude it and have it sort of dock on the left-hand side. And again, I did this through the bars tab of my format bars and series task pane. So now it is still sorting, but it's excluding this particular bar from my sort. I can also change the layout of my charts. I want to just make that, call your attention to that. So there's a layout button here in the edit chart toolbar. And I can make this a horizontal chart. I can make any vertical a horizontal chart. And I can also swap my y-axis position, but we'll go back to a vertical. And we'll click off. Okay. The next chart that we want to, and actually this is the last chart for today's webinar, is a scatter chart. So in this scatter chart, the smartphone ownership, what you can see here, what makes this an interesting chart, is that we're using the legend in a smart way in this chart. So And let me show you how this is done. So here's a scatter chart. It has a little bit of a very similar layout in the terms of the data to a bubble chart. So I'm just going to open up my data, and you'll see it's got my series label, my X and my Y coordinate, but also my marker and regression. It's like a grouping. And so I'm grouping all of these different countries into these regions. And then my legend is being driven by these groupings. And so if I close my chart, you can now see that these different countries are being reflected in the legend by their regions. I'll go to the Format Chart task pane. Sometimes in a scatter you want to see quadrant lines. You can do that right here. In the General tab, you can show quadrant lines if you want. You can even change the style of those lines. So if you didn't want it blue and you wanted it gray or you wanted it dashed, you have all sorts of different options for that as well. And we'll go ahead and click off that chart. Quickly want to show you tables. This is a standard PowerPoint table. It's a native PowerPoint table. I didn't do anything fancy. I just went to my insert menu and I inserted a regular old table. However, once you insert a table and you have Mekko Graphics installed, you have a couple of bells and whistles here in the Design tab. This section right here where you can insert your Harvey balls. And you can insert them by size. So these are the different sizes. So if I wanted to insert a Harvey ball, and I can make them whatever color I want. There we go. So you can do that through the Design tab. Also, in terms of the colors here, you can, whatever palette you're using will be reflected here, so you can have access to those same colors in your tables. Okay, didn't want to keep that because it was kind of ugly. So like in this chart, you can see who's using our charts. We've got, a lot of strategy consultants using Emeco and Cascade, and then enhancements. These are our three most used enhancements: axis breaks, Kaggle columns, and growth lines. All right, so just want to talk very quickly about what resources are available to you. We've talked a little bit about the training videos. Please check them out. We're growing a larger and larger library of training videos that are available on our website. We also have a gallery of charts, literally over 100 charts that you can download for free and use and examine to learn how people are using charts in Mekko Graphics. We have, I'm not going to go over every single one of these, but in the Ask column here, I want to just reinforce one thing. If you don't know how to create a chart or you're not sure what chart to create, we have something right here in our Mekko Graphics tab under the Resources section where you can ask an expert. So you can ask an expert, and we have charting experts here who will be happy to assist you. Also, if you're having a technical problem, you need our help, we would like you to email us through this button here at Email Support. When you do that, it attaches a diagnostic file to your email, and that just helps us help you faster. So we're not going back and forth and asking you questions about your operating system or what you have installed or whatever. It will give us quick information that will help us help you faster. So we would encourage you to use that button as well. We have an active community on LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook, so we encourage you to connect with us there as well. The final slides in this presentation we're not going to go over here today. However, we're including these for your deck just to see how people are using the different charts. What are the use cases for all of these different chart types? So we hope you find those useful to you. We have time for a few questions. I know that we've been answering questions for the duration of this webinar. One question that came in is how do you insert multiple charts on a slide? And you can do that. So if I'm just going to insert a blank slide here just so we have one. In that Mekko Graphics tab, you have the very first drop down is you have the ability to do these different sort of layouts for inserting more than one chart on a slide. So if I were to do, say, 4 charts on a slide or 3 charts on a slide, it will go ahead and insert. Now, it always inserts a stacked bar. Well, what if I don't want a stacked bar? What do I do? Okay, so click a chart, and you can change it to a different chart type. Under the type drop-down, you can insert, you can convert a chart from one type that's similar to another type. So you can't convert like a stacked bar to a bubble. That would be weird. But you could convert a stacked bar to a bar Mekko or to a cluster bar or whatever. So the layout for multiple chart types always inserts a stacked bar because it is it is a very common chart to the people will insert. But then you can always just change that chart type. And if you wanted a bubble, you could just convert it to a bubble. It will convert. It just won't have any data because it won't know what to do with it. And then you can just enter your own data. Okay, that's a great question. Okay, another question that we got in was around the preference manager. I do want to reiterate again, we have a video about that on our website as well because we didn't go through all of the features of the preference manager. But if you have, I think what the question is that if you have an existing chart that you got, say, from a colleague or a client, and you want to change the palette of that chart to whatever your preference manager is, you can do that. So if you open a chart, you have something called Apply PM Settings, which is take this chart and whatever my preference manager settings are, go ahead and apply those settings to this chart. Now, if this is just an FYI, if you have custom colors in a chart, that like if you right-clicked a segment and you chose a specific custom RGB, it's not going to override your custom settings because the idea is that if you have custom colored segments, they sort of take priority over global palette settings. So you'll have to sort of turn that off and then apply your PM settings for those to apply to those segments that you might have altered manually. Okay. We don't have any other questions at this point, and we are right at the end of our time, so that was great. I want to thank you for sticking with us for this webinar. Again, we're available if you want to email us, support@mekkographics.com. We'll be happy to help, and hope you have a great day. Thanks for watching. Take care.